Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Kesubos Daf Chavav, Kesubos 26. And we're going to start on the top of Chavav Amud Aleph, where the Gemara is discussing that a person can be elevated to the status of the kahuna. Even a brother can elevate another brother in a situation, the Gemara said, of the Messiah Chafituma, where he spoke innocently, he spoke without intending to testify. And so in that context, the Gemara on the top of Chavav Amud Aleph is going to give us another example of what does it mean to be Messiah Chafituma, what does it mean to speak innocently. So Gemara explains, Ki hada amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel, like Rav Yehuda taught in the name of Shmuel, Ma'aseh ba'adam echad shayeh Messiah Chafitumo. There was an incident about a person who was Messiah Chafitumo. Amar, and he said, Zechorani, he said, I remember Kishani Tinok, when I was a child, Murkav al Ksefo shel Abba, and I was riding on the shoulders of my father. My father used to carry me on his shoulders. Votziuni mi beis hasefer. They took me out of school. So that proves that the reason why this is mentioned is this proves that he was, Rashi Tosa says, so we don't say that he was a slave. So we want because they didn't send the slaves to the schools. So he says I was in a school, so I was Jewish, and they put me on my father's shoulders because if he would be a slave, because we want to prove at the end of the story that this person is a Kohen because he ate the truma. But just the fact that he ate truma isn't enough to prove he's a Kohen, because a slave of a Kohen can also eat the truma. So they prove he's not a slave because by saying he says I was in school. If Shituni Eskutanti, and they took off my coat vitbiluni, and they immersed me in the mikvah echol b'truma or erev, to eat truma that night. Rav Chaim concluded this story that this person was saying v'chaveirai b'dilan mi many, and my friends used to stay away from me because they knew that I was a Kohen, obviously, and they didn't want to make me tamei. Vayikoranasi Yochanan ochel chalos. They used to call me Yochanan who eats chalos. The Yochanan who eats chalo, eats the truma. And so this is the source for the idea that he was a Kohen. And Rebbe said, on the basis of this evidence, we're going to establish that you are a Kohen. So we see from here that this was a case of Messiah Chafituma, which we trust. And indeed, Tanya Rebbe Shimon ben Elazar Omar Kashem Shetruma Chazaka Kahuna, just like Truma is enough to establish that somebody's a Kohen, Kach Ma'aser Rishon Chazaka Kahuna. So too, if a person was eating the Ma'aser Rishon, it's enough to establish that he's a Kohen. What does that mean? The Ma'aser Rishon, there's that when you divide up the gifts, the first you give a tithe to the Kohen, that's a Truma, and then you give a tithe to the lady, which is called Ma'aser Rishon. But on this statement, this price, Rabbi Shimon Elazar says that when you give the Ma'aser Rishon, that's enough to establish that he's a Kohen. The Gemara is going to question that. And then the third statement in this price is Macholek bebezdin ena chazaka, and one who divides up from the court, that's not going to be enough of a presumptive status. And the Gemara says that Rashi explains that at first glance, we assume that the Gemara is going to assume that basically that they would divide up the truma to the people on the basis of the court that's established in the city when they would give it out in the granaries. And the Gemara is going to ask if the court is not a chazaka, and what is the chazaka? But in the meantime, we first analyze this price, we go through it. So the Gemara says, Ma'aser Rishon, the Levi. What are you talking about? Ma'aser Rishon is not enough to say that he's a Kohen. Ma'aser Rishon is the tithe that goes to the Levite. Where it says, you're right, typically speaking, Ma'aser Rishon is the tithe that goes to the Levite. But in this case, it is Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, because we're going to follow the position of Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, who taught the Tanya Truma, the Kohen, and Ma'aser Rishon, the Levi. Divrei Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva says that the Truma goes to the Kohen, and the Ma'aser Rishon goes to the Levite. Whereas Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah says Ma'aser Rishon apla Kohen, that also the Kohen can be given the Ma'aser Rishon. And so therefore, when it says that the Ma'aser Rishon is proof that he's a Kohen, it goes according to the position of Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah. Where it says, oh, that's not sufficient. Amor the Amar Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, Afla Kohen. Okay, so we can say that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that the Meiser can be given also to the Kohen, but Kohen below Levi mi Amar. But can you really say that it's given to the Kohen and not to the Levite? Meaning to say, it doesn't, from the fact that he gets the Meiser, it doesn't prove that he's a Kohen. It can just prove that he may be a Kohen, but he could also still be a Levite. So how would that be enough to establish the presumptive status that he's a Kohen? The Gemara says, yes, it is enough. In Basar de Konsinu Ezra, because this was after Ezra made a kanas, Ezra made a penalty against the Levites because that you shouldn't give them the Meiser Rishon because they did not come back from Babylon. And so therefore, if somebody gave the Meiser Rishon to a person, it must be a Kohen. Mar says, Vidilma Ikru, Yahavaway. Well, maybe it just so happened that somebody gave it to them. Maybe a person didn't know of the kanas of Ezra, didn't know of this penalty of Ezra, and he just gave it to the Levite. So Amar Rav Chisda, Hachamayaskinan Kigon Muchsak on Bavua, Dahai the Kohenu. No, what we're talking about here, says Rav Chisda, is where we have a presumptive status that this person's father was in fact a Kohen. And then the rumor came established that actually this person whose father was a Kohen, he actually himself was the son of a divorcee or the son of a chalutza, and therefore he would be a halal and disqualified from the Kohen. So then we saw, under these circumstances, we saw them giving out to him the meiser in the granary. So we know he can't be a Levi. If his father was a Kohen, he could either be one of two things. He could either be a Kohen or a halal, but he certainly can't be a Levi. So that's what we're saying. Levi, the Lav Levi. So we know he's not a Levite. So Ma'iko Meimer, what are we going to say? Ben Grusha ben Chalutza, who maybe he's the son of a divorcee or so what are we going to say? There's the son of a divorcee or the son of a chalutza, but from the fact that we give it to him the meiser, that proves that his mother was, that he's not the son of a divorcee or chalutza. And the Gemara says, it's not only according to the one opinion that says that meiser rishon is prohibited to be given to a non-Kohen to have a Yahweh, that they wouldn't give it to him. Of course, why would they give it to him? If you say it's prohibited to give it to a Zar, you say he must be the son of a Kohen. But even according to the Mandamar Meiser Rishon Mutar Zar, even according to the position that says the non-Kohanim are allowed to eat Meiser, that's still not enough to disqualify him from being a Kohen, because Hanimilu Misbeklahu, that's only that if you have a non-Kohen invited to your table, you're allowed to feed them at your table. But Torah's Chalukah, but to actually divide it up amongst the granaries, you wouldn't do that. So the Gemara then says, and one who divides up in the court is not a chazaka. At first glance, we had said, the Rashi says that the kasaka daita, Gemara assumes that what we're referring to here is that the court establishes who's the Kohen, and if they divide up to the people in the granaries, that's not enough to establish them as a Kohen. It's not enough of a presumptive status. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? If the court is if the court is not enough of a presumptive status, then where is it a presumptive status? So Amar Sheish is Kamar. This is what it means. Based in, let's say a person is dividing up his father's estate with his brother in front of the court. So one is dividing up his brother's estate. That's what Gemara says. And that's what Shesha says. That's not going to be enough of a chazaka to tell us what. Rashi says we're talking about a situation that there's a rumor being spread about his mother that she was a divorcee and therefore he's a halal. So the fact that he got the truma from his father's estate when it was divided with him and his brother when it was divided in court, that's not enough of a chazaka. So Pshita, of course, it's not enough of a chazaka. He just inherited something. Why would you think that that's a chazaka? So the Gemara says, no, Ma'al Tema, you might have thought midahana achila, from the fact that his older brother got it. His older brother got it for the purposes of eating. So therefore, he might have thought Hainami Lachila, that this brother also, about whom the rumor is that he's the son of a divorcee, well, such a person, maybe he also got the truma for eating, and so therefore, it's enough of presumptive status to assume that he's the offspring, that he himself is a Kohen. So that's not enough to say it. We could say that one is for eating it, and one is for selling it. Says the Gemara on the bottom of 26a. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Eimal kahuna al piyed echad." Rabbi Yehuda says we don't allow a person to be elevated to the kahuna on the basis of one witness. And also in our Gemara, we saw that this was also the position of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara had said on 23b at the bottom, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, that Rabbi Eliezer said, when do we say that? Rabbi Eliezer had said, there are people raising objections. If there are no people raising objections, we don't elevate to the kuna on the basis of one witness. Rashbag says in the name of Shimon ben Askan, that you can elevate on the basis of one witness. So Gemara seems to be saying, Rashbag seems to be saying that the same as Rabbi Eliezer, that you can elevate people on the basis of one witness unless there are orin. That when there's one objector, that's a difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Eliezer and Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Eliezer savar irachad. Rabbi Eliezer's of the position, even if one person objects, that's sufficient. Rashbag savar. Rashbag's of the position ir trey. But Rashbag is of the position that even if that you need two people to object, and so that Rabbi Eliezer is saying that you elevate them unless there's one person objecting. Rashbag says you elevate them unless there are two people objecting. Can't be. I'm a Rabbi Yochanan Divrako ain't error pachos b'shnayim. Rabbi Yochanan says that both according to Rabbi Eliezer and according to Shimon Gamliel, you need to have an error objector of two. Otherwise, it's not sufficient. What are we talking about here? To hide the Kohen Hill. What we're talking about here is that there was a presumptive status that this person's father was a Kohen. To ben Grusha or ben Chalutza. So there was a presumptive status that this person's father was a Kohen. And then there came out the rumor that he was the son of a divorcee or the son of a widow. And so as a result of that, they demoted him from the Kuna until they'll investigate the matter. And then after that, and that was an extra stringency that they did for the Kohanim, that on the basis of a rumor, they would temporarily demote somebody. But also, so basically what we've had here is we have the presumptive status that he's a Kohen, and there's the rumor that he's not a Kohen. And then after that, and one witness comes and says, look, we know about this person, we know he's a Kohen. We're on top of 26b. And then they elevated him. After that. And then two more people came. So they basically, there were presumptive status that he's a Kohen. Then there became a rumor that he was a non-Kohen. So they demoted him. Then there became one witness that he's a Kohen, so they elevated him. And two witnesses came that he was the son of a divorcee, i.e. a non-Kohen, and they demoted him. Then one witness came and said, and he says, I know for certain that he's a Kohen. And so therefore, they're going to return him to his original status of being a Kohen. Okay, with the Kuli Alma and everybody's in a position. The Kuli Alma, everybody's in a position to mitzdarfen edus, that we can combine people to make testimony. Mitzdarfen, that if there are two witnesses who testify against each other, neither one is in front of the other, we're able to combine them by other cases, by other circumstances, not by the Kohen. And here what we're talking about is here what we're talking about is whether or not we have to be concerned about the court's honor, Zehusa de Beidina. Because what has the court done? They've demoted him twice. They first demoted him on the basis of the rumor. Now they've demoted him on the basis of two witnesses. And so therefore their words will be nullified. and they'll look like a mockery. And that's what Rebbe Lazar is saying, that since we lowered him on the base of the Orim, we're not going to elevate him on the basis of these two witnesses, even though we could combine them. So we're not going to be able to, on the basis of these two witnesses, we're not going to, even though we could combine them, we're not going to. So that's the position of Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanakh Savar Kivin Dachtine Lo Maskinoi Chashino Zeus Dina. That whereas Rabbi Eliezer's other position, that since we demoted him, we're not going to elevate him. Whereas Rashbag says, Ana Naftinoi Bana Maskinoi Zeus Dina Lo Chashina. We demoted him, we can elevate him. We're not concerned about the Zehusa of the court. We're not concerned about the disrespect to the court. So Maska for Ravashi challenges this. Well, if that's what we're talking about, why do we have to say that one witness came at the end? If it's just about being demoted, one witness at the beginning and one witness at the end, separated by these two witnesses who are trying to demote him, it's an unusual case. But if it's just about being demoted and then being elevated, it could even be it could have the two witnesses come together at the end. Ravashi says, no, we're specifically talking about specifically talk about whether or not you can combine the witnesses. It's the same dispute that we had elsewhere. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa in Baba Basra, where we learned Ein Edusa Mitzarefes Ad Shiru Shneim Ke'echad, that the two witnesses don't combine unless they see it together. Rabbi Shimon Karcha says, "Afil b'zeh achar zeh," that even if they see them one after the other, it's enough to say that they could be two witnesses on the same matter. And now we say the ein edusa miskayemis, and you can't testify. Actually, meaning to say that testimony is not going to be upheld unless they both testify as once, like which is not the case like we have here. Rabbi Nassan says, "Shomin dvarv shel zayom, whereas Rabbi Nassan is saying, like the case here is okay, where it's one witness at the beginning and one witness at the end, and so therefore that's why he's going to say it's okay. That'll be accepted in court even if they don't come together. And so therefore, Rabbi Lazar and Shimon, they have the same dispute as Rabbi Nassan and the Rabbanon. The Rabbi Nassan who says that they have to come together. So he's going to say, like Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, whereas Rabbi Elazar who says that if they don't come together, Rabbi Elazar says that if they don't come together, they're no good. He holds like the Rabbi. So it says the Gemara. It says the Mishnah. We're in the Mishnah in the middle of 26b. It says the Mishnah, if a woman was captured by the idolaters, which was captured for the purpose of money, they want to ransom her off. We're going to say she's allowed to return to her husband. And the way Rashi explains it is because if she knows her life is not in danger, she's not going to be tempted to do anything to save her life. And what the concern is that she might have willingly given herself to her captors. And so therefore, since it was just for the purpose of them raising some ransom, they're not going to want to ruin their assets, so to speak, because they know if the word comes out that she was adulterous with them, then her value as being redeemed will fall. Whereas whereas if the idolater is captured in order to kill her, then we're going to say asur l'ba'al, she's going to be prohibited to return to her husband. And again, here the idea of Rashi says, other Rishonim say this is a reference to the wife of a Kohen. But Rashi says, no, we're talking about this case of where a woman is going to try to seduce the guards in order to be freed. And so therefore, she gave of herself willingly to her captors, and so therefore she's prohibited to return to her husband, even if he's not a Kohen. So Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rav Shanu, when do we learn this halacha that when it comes to money, she's allowed to return to her husband if she was just kidnapped for money? That's only taught when the Jewish people say, when the Jews are more powerful than the idolaters, and so therefore they know that the idolaters are going to have to keep their word. But however, in a circumstance where Yad Ovdei Kocham to Kif al Atzman, in a circumstance where the idolaters are ruling over themselves, then I'll feel like they mamon asur about that even if she was captured for money, she's going to be prohibited to return to her husband. Master Rava. So then Rava challenges this because we have a mission 80 which tells us, hey, Rav Yossi, Akohen Rabbi Zachari ben Ketzav al Bas Yisrael, Sharana Ba'ashkon. So Rabbi Yossi, Akohen Rabbi Zachari ben Ketzav, they testified about a Bas Yisrael, about the daughter of an Israelite she was placed as a deposit in Ashkelon, meaning to say that they said she basically pawned herself off until she was able to raise the money to pay off the debt. And her family members stayed away from her. And the witnesses, they testify about her that she was not defiled and she was not secluded with these idolaters. And Chachamim testified said about these witnesses, if we believe these witnesses that she was indeed deposited with the idolaters, let's also believe her that she was not, believe them that she was not secluded. She was not defiled. Meaning to say it's the same type of argument we've been seeing before, Pesha Asar or Pesha Hiter. Since the witnesses are the ones who say she was deposited, we believe them when they say she wasn't defiled. And if you don't believe her, if we don't believe them that she was not secluded, then don't believe her that she was deposited in the first place. So we see from here Ashkelon, the Kochavim to keep Ashkelon was the place where the idolaters were stronger than the Jews because that was the land of the Philistines. And the Jewish people had already been exiled at this point. Vikatani, and it states for her, and that if she was deposited, we're going to say that if she was deposited with the idolaters, that's what we're talking about. But not if she was captured. So what does that mean? Her hana that midas that she deposited herself on her own. And the kiman de gias man she says base. And since the time came and she was not captured, redeemed, she's like an idolater. So therefore, we're going to require the witnesses about her that she was not secluded. So this is actually on the next piece. But anyway, we see from here that if she was deposited, we're going to say under those circumstances that if she was deposited, then she requires the Eidim in order to say she's allowed. But if she was not deposited, then we require it. So we see from here that if she was captured, we don't need the witnesses. It has nothing to do with mammon or nefashos. So the Gemara says, no, even if she was captured, she would not require witnesses. And what's the story? What did they say about deposit? Because that's just what happened. That's just the way it happened to be. Okay, so the Gemara then says a different version of this. Some say, Amar Rav Yosef, Afanan Nami Timuna. Rav Yosef says, we also learned this. We had another way of discussing the same idea that this is only the case when the hand of the Jews is stronger than the idolaters. If the hand of the idolaters is stronger than themselves, and even through mammon, she's going to be prohibited to her husband. And so some say that Rabbah said this is indeed, we went to the Mishnah. Because hey, Rabbi Yossi Yaakov, Rabbi Zachari ben Ketzav, Abbas Yisrael, about a Jewish girl, Sharana Ba'ashkon, she was deposited in Ashkelon, Rechkua b'nei mishpachto, and her family separated from her. The and the witnesses testified about her that she was not secluded or defiled. So this is so far until it's the same source, the same Mishnah. But now the Gemara says, Ashkelon, what's the reason why she was captured? It was for monetary purpose. Taima the Eidim Me'idim, what's the reason? And so since at Ashkelon she was captured for a monetary purpose, and what's the reason why she's allowed, why she's permitted? But Taima, what's the reason? The aid and the eating or so, only because they're witnesses who testify. Aid is so low, but if witnesses are not be testifying, it wouldn't be sufficient. My love, doesn't it not matter at all whether because of a deposit or because she was captured? And the Gemara says no. Hurhana shani. No, Hurhana is different than deposited. The Gemara says Hurhana is different than captured. And then the Gemara has a different version of this, which is a Ika way that some say this whole thing as a question. And how do they say this whole thing as a question? Ika way mirma tana idei mama muteris labala. That's going to the Mishnah. She was captured for money. She's allowed to return to her husband. Raminu heyed Rabbi Yossi Ashkon idei mamon. Ashkon, she was captured for money. Zakatani time of the edim edim was why can she return to her husband? Only because of the witnesses. Hayin edim edim are so low. But if there were no witnesses, she wouldn't be able to return, even though it's for money. So the Gemara says, Mashani, Amar Shmuel Bar Yitzchak Kasha Kancha Yad Yisrael to keep avodah Klavim Kancha Yad of the Klavim to keep Alatzma. It depends who's in charge. If the Jews are in charge, we'll allow her to return. But if the idolaters are in charge, we won't allow. So we'll stop here. And if anybody has any questions, I'm of course happy to answer them.